Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hello friends and welcome to my April wrap up. It's the 1st of May and I'm very excited to be wrapping up April for y'all. It definitely is a lovely spring day outside today. I'm looking at all the beautiful green grass out there. I think I'm going to need to go for a walk today, listen to my audiobook, and just enjoy the day. I think it's going to be great. May has so many crazy things coming up. It's going to be amazing. But before we get to that, we'll have to go back through April, which ended up being I think my most successful reading month of the year, which is kind of awesome. I love seeing that. I think I've been getting a bit more dialed in month after month, which has been great. And again, you know, having a month be better or best is really all subjective. To me, a lot of it is about finding quality reads, but I do still enjoy being able to get through my TBR successfully and read as much as I can. I mean, that is the greatest joy of doing this full time, of being super engaged in everything. I just love that. So it's all very exciting stuff. But anyway, let us get into it. Now, as I always start my monthly wrap-ups off with a little disclaimer. I am not going to talk about every book that I've read this month. I actually do weekly wrap-ups, which I will have linked up here, the playlist of that. And so you can actually hear about every book that I've read if you'd like to. But in this one, I'm going to talk about my stats really quick, just because everyone enjoys hearing that. We're all a bit nosy. And then I'm going to talk about my top 5 reads that I had, of which there was some absolutely wonderful ones. So I'm very excited to do that. And that will be what this monthly wrap up consists of. Okay. So yeah, I don't like to talk about much negative, and I don't like to, talk about every single thing, because that's what my weekly wrap ups are. We would be here for hours and hours if I did that. But let's go ahead and dive into it. All right. I read 34 books, putting my total up to 126. Actually, I have read one more book since I wrapped up this, but I put me at 126, which is just over halfway to my yearly goal this year, which I did lower my yearly goal this year to just reinforce with myself that I'm not trying to go for a specific number or anything. But I did make my yearly goal 250 books this time. And I'm just over the halfway mark there. So just a third of the way through the year. So that's great. But then that was 12,101 pages, which is actually by far the most pages that I've read. That's what I found the most interesting, actually. I only read one more book than last month, but I read about 3,000 more pages. So that's really funny. It was like where all those pages fit in. And I mean, it's definitely in a lot of the fanfic. And I read, well, we'll get into it. I'll point it out. There's a certain type of book that I read that I think makes up for a lot of the pages, because that type of book tends to be very long. The formats I read, 8 of these were audiobooks, 5 were ARCs, 20 were on an e-reader or ebook format, and 10 were physical reads. Then the subgenres of these books, here we go. I had 7 contemporary romance, 3 dark romance, 14 fan fictions, which is one more than last month, really, but the same as February. Crazy. So still being consistent about basically every other book I read, or fic, or whatever. Every other thing I'm reading is a fanfic, which is awesome. 2 dystopians, 4 fantasy, 1 paranormal, and 3 romantic suspense or suspenseful romance. So there's the ticket in there if you caught it. I read 4 fantasies this month, and that is the most fantasy I've read in a month in, I can't even tell you when. Usually I only get through about 1, and I do believe that's where a bulk of those more pages came from, because I got through Souls in Ruin, Direbound, and then yesterday I just finished Halfling. It was actually I think that was actually my last read of the month. And then there's one other fantasy one too. Oh, Bloodsinger. Now, Bloodsinger and Halfling were a bit more normal size, but still they're longer than contemporary normally is. So that definitely, oh, and also one of my other favorites of the month we'll get to was almost 500 pages as well. So I think that's where that like page difference really was there. I love analyzing this stuff. I know some people don't care, but I think it's fascinating how it works. Then the star ratings. Let's talk about that. I had 1 new 6-star read. I had 4 5-star reads. I had 3 4.5-star reads, 20 4-star reads, 4 3.5-star reads, and 2 3-star reads. So a pretty good spread there, but I did have 1 new 6-star read, which we will of course be talking about. And as always, I want to show you this is my stats page here. Yes, and then May is starting over here, which I also think looks stunning. So just want to show off my journal page here. On the previous pages where I have my favorites, and I'll show you that after I talk about them, but I used a lot of gold foiling on this one, which was fun. So there we go. Alrighty, time to talk about my top 5 reads. So for these, I'm going to go in order that I read them through the year. So, or through the month. All right. So, Captivation Creek by Claire Kingsley was one of my favorites this month. Now, I did give this one 4.5 stars. And the reason why, anyway, again, this doesn't matter, but the reason why 2 of my top reads are 4.5 stars, even though I said I had 4 5-star reads, is that some of those were rereads, right? So I didn't count those in here. But this one is the most recent release for her. In fact, this was an ARC copy of this one. And I listened to the audiobook for this one, which was dual narrated by Vanessa Edwin and Alistair Hainsbridge. And this is the 5th book in the Haven Brothers series. And I thought this one was so cute and was just fun, because this one is actually a friends to lovers between coworkers. And I thought it was unique because these weren't like, having a guy and a girl be best friends, not because of them knowing each other since childhood, not because of them being best friends, or their siblings being best friends. I thought was so interesting. Like, they literally became besties at work. And I love that, because I have a really dear friend right now. We don't even work together anymore. Obviously, I do this for a full-time thing, but we worked together when I worked a corporate job, and we've stayed really close friends. We work out together 2 to 3 days a week. She's really the only one outside my sister, and who's not a bookish creator, that I talk to regularly. And truly, I just love that relationship so much. And it's not through any other connections or through any other people. That is an adult friendship that I maintain on my own. And I don't know, there's just something about that in the world we live, where we're all very disconnected and we're very separated from one another, that just makes something really special about it. So these two, they work at a school, and Theo Haven is a coach at the high school. He also teaches math. And then our heroine is the art teacher, Penelope. So yeah, there's Theo Haven and Penelope. And I also love this because my best friend, she is an art teacher as well. I've shared about her before, and she's the sweetest little thing. I just love her. So there was just so much about this book that was very much you know, this is narcissistic to say, but it felt very catered to me. And then add in what the mystery element is, which I'll tell you in just a second. And I was like, this is like the perfect small town mystery, diving into it with your best friend, trying to find the answers to everything together, that I could see myself doing with my sister or my friend, wanting to figure out what was going on. And it also was nice because these two are pretty smart about how they go about it, but they're also not like these absolute geniuses. They do a bit stumble into what's going on, and then they're just, you know, they have the time to be curious about it, and so they do. Now, this book does start off with Penelope dating a real loser, and that leads to when Penelope's art mentor, so she's taken some classes from a professional while she herself is an art teacher. Again, very relatable, very real, you know, continuing education. And her mentor dies and she wants to go to the memorial service, and her current partner totally blows her off, which on one hand, I understand not wanting to go to a random guy's memorial. But on the other hand, when your partner is asking for something, maybe you should go along with it, right? Don't be a total asshat about it. And so Theo ends up going with her. And when they're at this memorial, she notices something very weird about the dynamics between the son of this guy, his widow, and then it appears that at least one of the women who's there was maybe a mistress to this man who died. And so there's just some very weird dynamics happening at this memorial service. Okay, then the next step that happens is, either way, we won't get into the whole, like, I don't want to walk through every single step of this, but she does end up breaking up with her partner and he kicks her out of their home. And so she ends up staying with Theo for the rest of the book. And she also receives, I can't remember if it's a call or if it's an email, but she gets told that her mentor had left her one of his paintings in his will. He had left some of them to his different students that he thought were quite promising. And so she goes and receives this, and she discovers a note hidden in the back of the painting. And that leads into what our mystery is. So all the steps along the way in this, her and Theo are kind of in it together. They do go kind of undercover at one point together to do some snooping. And I also like it that Theo, of course, tells his brother Garrett, who Garrett is from, I think, book 2 in the series, but he's also the like sheriff, the one of only a few police officers in town. And they tell him what they've discovered. And he's like, well, that's not really anything for me to get into. And Theo's like, right, I totally understand. But now if we do find something, you can't say I didn't tell you about it and act all indignant that I went diving into it. And Garrett's like, you know what? Fair enough. This town has had its share of weirdness. You've told me about it. Stay safe. And I just love that note because truly when they start digging into it, they don't know if these were just a scavenger hunt from an eccentric man, or if there is something more sinister going on. But of course, things do start to escalate a little bit, and it seems that maybe they've stumbled into a bit more than they meant to. And by this guy leaving that note to Penelope, she's getting sucked into something that she normally wouldn't have been. So this is perfectly delightful. I thought the romantic suspense elements were great in this book, and I had a wonderful time reading it, and I'm really looking forward to the very last book in the series, which will be about the estranged son, Reese, who we've been hearing about through the whole series. So, love it. Those books are typically really low spice from her, but there also was a really great build up to the relationship between these two that I thought was really sweet. They genuinely had such a great friendship, and so it just made everything feel really real, including them falling for one another once she was broken up from this jerk face, because Theo, he hadn't been thinking about her romantically before then. But he realized she wasn't being treated well, and he didn't want his friend to not be treated well. So, I love that. Okay, next up, we have Unbound by Peyton Corinne. And yes, this was my 6-star read. Okay, I have been anticipating this book for a very long time. Hold on. I've been calling this one Undone in every place, when Undone is going to be the last book in the series. And Undone is the name of the series, I believe, is what she's calling it. Of course, they don't list the series name in these books because they don't want people to think they have to read them in order. But I personally think it brings a lot to it if you do. And both Unsteady, which was a 6-star read for me, and Unloved, which was a 5-star read for me, I love them dearly, and I highly recommend them all. Now, Unbound is about Paloma Blake and Bennett Rainier, and they are very broken people. They're seniors in college, and we learn very early that they had a fling with each other, or what was more than a fling, during their freshman year when they were getting to know one another. They had a poetry class together, I think that it is. And they realize they both have an affinity for that. And so we do bounce between their freshman year and their senior year in flashbacks, but I think they were very well done to me, which I complain about flashbacks in quite a few books that I read. I really do. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, because I think they are overdone and not handled correctly. But because these flashbacks aren't showing us stuff that we knew already, they're filling in the gaps. And then once you have that knowledge, we don't really overly discuss it, right? This was a problem that I just had with a different book that I'll be talking about it in my weekly wrap up tomorrow, so I won't belabor the point here. But if you're going to use flashbacks, they need to show us things that we wouldn't know in the present time by just talking about it, because otherwise you're showing and telling. This one very much is showing us what it was like between these two, where we have Bennett, who is on the spectrum. He has OCD compulsions and crippling anxiety. And he's quiet and meticulous. And then we have Paloma Blake, who currently in the other books, we've seen her as this antagonistic puck bunny who will fuck any guy who wants to fuck her and who just acts very laissez-faire about everything. And it's only through these flashbacks and through the current time when we're in their head, because now we're in their heads. Whereas in previous books, right, we were only observing things that we were seeing. We realized how desperately these two long for each other, but something happened that irrevocably split them apart, and we don't know what it is. And oftentimes, especially when you're in a new adult scenario, it's kind of like, how bad can it actually be that split you guys up? This just feels like drama over the top, yada, yada. And sure, there are people reviewing this who feel that way about it. However, I think that as we discover the personality of Paloma and who she is, and Bennett as well, who's just the absolute, oh my God, I love him with everything. I love him so much. There's just something about the two of them that they are missing huge chunks of their soul not being together. But the pain, particularly in Paloma's life, and yes, this book does have some pretty severe trauma, and I'll tell you what the trigger warnings are in near the end of this here. But these two are so deeply in love, and they just don't think they can ever make it work. But they're also, kind of resigned to the fact that they will live incomplete, unwhole for the rest of their lives because they had a perfect love in college for this brief amount of time, and now it all blew up. And Bennett, particularly, with his eccentricities and with his diagnoses that he has, he believes that he's the one who messed this all up. And he just, he will regret that forever. He blames himself. Whereas Paloma knows what she did to push him away. She did it very deliberately, and she thinks that she can only possibly bring Bennett down. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking once you learn her past and learn who she is, because all of that is a front. And Bennett had been doing so good getting under that, getting into that. But when she decided to kick him out, he wasn't going to force himself into it, right? He was never going to push her to be with him. But it's a tragedy for both of them that she's not letting him in. And when we're with them in the current time where they're seniors, I think Paloma's just gotten very tired of constantly pushing him away. And Bennett's realizing that he maybe only has, if he can get her to give him a chance, which is how he sees it, if he can get her to give him a chance, this may be the last opportunity because they will be done with school soon. And then how will he get her in his orbit anymore? I'm doing such a poor job explaining this one, and I hope to in subsequent months, because I will be rereading this eventually. It's my 6-star read. I absolutely want to reread this one and annotate it as I did with Unsteady. I hope to become a bit more articulate about speaking about them. But guys, I just held this book so close to my heart. I'm not someone who needs poetic language or, lavender or pink prose to feel very deeply about characters. But there is a way that Peyton Corinne writes her longing and desire that is very poetic. And in this book, where they're both into poetry, and also I found out, I did not know this, Peyton Corinne's father is a poet. That just made so much click for me. And just as, and to say, I wouldn't want to read every book I've read be like that. I do want it to, and I also, the aching, longing, and sadness is almost too much at points. But it's because of the payoff of these two finding each other again and finally communicating correctly, and Bennett not letting it go when he comes up against that wall again. It's just so satisfying and rewarding when they get it right, and they both deserve it so much. This does have some elements of BDSM in their sex life. That is something that Bennett needs for his control issues and things like that. And Paloma loves that aspect as well because of the chaotic and often difficult relationship she's had with sex in the past. With Bennett, fully trusting him and allowing him to be in control is like the greatest gift to her and that she can give him. And I think it's done really well. Now, as for the trigger warnings, if you would like to skip those, do so if you feel they'd be spoilers. But what I think makes this very heavy is that a lot of the trigger warnings here, are depictions of obsessive thought spirals, compulsive acts, and panic attacks. And there are mentions and discussions of childhood trauma, neglect, and sexual abuse, and the grooming of a minor. And that does happen, or did happen, to Paloma. So that is also very difficult for a lot of people to read, and I completely understand. But I love this so much, and Peyton Corinne just has this magical way of telling painful stories that are transcendent to me, and I have not stopped thinking about that book pretty much a single day since I read it pretty early on in the month. Okay, next up, for a very big change, I have Bloodsinger, and this was another one that was 4.5 stars. Though I feel like moving it up to 5 because I realized when I look back that I did give book 1 a 5-star. And as I've said, I liked Bloodsinger better than book 1, which now I can't remember the title, Firebird. I like this better than Firebird. So maybe I would like switch the ratings on those and give Firebird 4.5 and give Bloodsinger 5. I don't know. But anyway, this is the second book in the Fire That Binds series. And this is about dragon shifters who in general are kind of evil. They're the ones controlling Rome. And these three sisters who were sold into slavery in of different kinds. Let me just say that. And also are witches who have special powers and different things. And the heroine in this one, Leela, is a blood singer, and she can actually use blood to do her will and to control people. Now, this isn't a power that she has full possession of in the beginning of this story. And in fact, she never fully discovered her powers until she had been captured and sold into slavery. And she used it one time as retaliation against her master, and because it was new, she wasn't able to use it to like escape or to kill him, just enough to make him angry and to forcibly make her wear a bridle whenever she's in public. Yes, so great. To show her subjugation and the control that he has over this very powerful being who is his slave. It is as awful as you think it is. Let me just say that. However, in this world of ancient Rome, of slavery and magic and just decadence and quite evil, there is a rebel force that is trying to do something about it. And we get introduced to that in Firebird, and I really don't want to spoil that. You need to read this series in order. Just saying, like, you need to, because the whole rebellion is set up in the first one. Now, the things I will say is that these three women that are the leads of these books, they are sisters, but they are separated from one another. And in Firebird, that heroine, she is in Rome the same as Leela is, but whereas that heroine was taken under Julian's control, and he is a part of this rebellion, and so her slavery was a very kind of like faux slavery at the time. He made her his body slave to keep her from being taken by anyone else, and he was treating her very well. Leela that is not what happens to her. She gets sold to a vicious man who assaults her and rapes her and abuses her in any way you can imagine. It's horrendous. And she knows really nothing of who's involved in the rebellion or what's going on to try to change how things are. So we have Tiberius, I think it's Trajan Tiberius, who is also part of this rebellion. And when Julian in the first book made some choices, which I don't hold against him because the man made those decisions, but Julian was the nephew of the Caesar, so he had a connection and access that a lot of the other members of the rebellion don't. But Julian had to make his choices and do what he did. And now Trajan and the rest of the rebellion have to adjust their plan and keep going. And one part of that plan that isn't really a spoiler to this, again, I don't want to spoil everything, but Trajan is newly elected tribune to the Senate. And he and his grandfather and a few other members of this are trying to maneuver things to make a bid for control, and so they can hopefully take over the voting body in Rome and eventually, like usurp the Caesar and change things up. I'm trying to be vague while also explaining some stuff. I'm sorry. But the point is, what's not a spoiler here is that the cruelty that Leela is living with, she finally snaps. And she's much more powerful with her blood singing power than she was in the past, even though she hasn't been able to practice it as much to hone it in. She is still grown in power through time, and rage really helps her expel it quite powerfully. And so one of the nights when she's being abused by her master, she snaps and kills him. And it just so happens that Trajan was also on his way to assassinate her master. And she beat Trajan to it. So we have this awkward moment in this where she's literally standing over like the dead body of her master, and Trajan comes upon her. Now, of course, she is like, oh no, this guy just caught me doing this. And she thinks things are going to go one way. And instead, Trajan's like, oh my God, this witch, she's so powerful. This is, but also, ooh, what are we going to do? Because now she's going to be blamed for this, which actually kind of works out a little bit because he didn't really have a plan for who they were going to blame this assassination on. So now she can be blamed for this, but he also needs to get her out of there. And now they're looking for like a runaway slave instead of looking for an assassin, right? They just think it was a slave who killed her master and whatever. But it is also pretty scary that to them, I mean, not to us, we think it's great, that someone who is a slave was able to kill a dragon and he wasn't able to stop that because her master was a dragon too. So anyway, now she's under the protection of Trajan and he has promised to smuggle her out of the country. They just have to be very careful because now everyone's on the lookout for this runaway slave. And he also still has things that he's trying to maneuver and do so that their rebellion can be moving forward. So anyway, whole lot of stuff to explain, a lot of stuff to get through, but I just really love this one. I loved how there's a super cool scene in here. I don't want to spoil, but how Trajan proves his alliance to Leela. I think that is a fantastic scene. Of course, there's some cool reveals as she starts to learn what's been going on. There are people trying to help the slaves who are trying to change things. And it isn't as bleak as she thought. And just those revelations were really cool in the story. So I really like this one. I listened to an audiobook of this as well as I did have a physical ARC because as I've always say, Juliet Cross, I've been reading her for many years now. She is a friend as well. One of my close friends, Jessin, she is her aunt. So I am, of course, a bit inclined to love her books because I love her, but I have, no compunction of saying how much I love this. It was really good. If anything, just it being Juliet's book gets me to get to it sooner, because with a lot of fantasy, sometimes I drag my feet. It's more so that it being Juliet's book gets me to get to it sooner than I might if it was from someone else. So that's kind of the positive. But yeah, I gave that 4.5 stars. Oh yeah, it was narrated by Blair Dade and Cale Williams, and they did a wonderful job. Okay, next up. It wouldn't be a wrap up in 2026 if I didn't have a fanfic that made it onto my favorites list. Because that's pretty much been the trend of the year for sure. And yeah, every month but the first one, I've had one on here. And this time, this one, well, not this time. This one as well as a sadder one. But I thought this one was so well written and just felt so real that I couldn't help myself. So this one was called All I Ask of You. And this one was by I Said Saddle Up. And this is a fic where Ilya and Shane become the guardians to the Pike children. So to all 4 of them. Because Jackie and Hayden, yes, very sadly, they die in a car crash in the beginning of this fic. And Shane and Ilya are their guardians. And this whole fic is about them navigating, taking on 4 kids, the hockey world grieving about the loss of them, and a little bit of a custody fight with a family member you might not expect. And also, though, just a lot of day-to-day, how to, handle your own grief as well as the grief of 4 children, and seeing them become parents like that is just like gut-wrenching, but it was also so beautiful. I cried so many times, but it also was a very hopeful book at the same time. So yeah, I loved this one so much, and I know it's not going to be for everyone. I mean, that's the way with all the ones that are fanfic that I'm reading. I know they're not for everyone, but there's just something about that type of story that really scratched an itch for me. and I loved it so much. So yeah, I gave that one a spot in my top 5, and I will have it linked down below for you to enjoy yourself. And then the final book that I loved, one that I gave 5 stars, was All for Love by Willow Astor. And I'll tell you, this one was like so many others in this series. This is part of the Windy Harbor series, which I love because it takes place in Minnesota. They're just so ooey gooey and sweet. This one has a very young single mom, whose name is Dahlia, and she actually meets Dylan, who is one of the, are they Whitakers? Is that what their names are? Now I can't remember, but part of our, main family. They actually meet on a plane when Dahlia, it's flying from California to Minnesota, and Dahlia basically passes out in his lap. She hasn't eaten anything, and she gets low blood sugar, and she passes out. And she wakes up, like, looking up at this super hot guy. And they end up having this flirting and banter going, and they just can't stop chatting, and they end up going on, like, a impromptu date. And then, because they'd landed in Minnesota, they end up getting kind of snowed in for a day, and they go on a couple other dates and have this great connection with one another. Now, I'd said our heroine is a single mom, and she is. And the reason she was on the way back from California is that she had dropped her 3-year-old or 2.5-year-old off with her father, and she was going to be staying with him for a week. And it's very emotional for her to do that, but she's trying to be fair and let, her ex have the child for, visits and things like that. They don't have a formal custody agreement in place, which is crazy to me, but they're trying to keep it civil and everything. And it was just so hard for her to leave her daughter there. The daughter doesn't know her dad super well. Her dad has all different girlfriends coming through all the time. And so it's just very stressful for her to do. And so she hadn't eaten, and she's just really stressed. But Dylan, he is just enamored with this girl. He's definitely not scared away by her being a single mom. He just thinks she's the best. After a couple days home, though, and actually of them, like, chatting it up and everything. So he's being one of the people in this family. He's trying to move to Minnesota full time to be closer to his father, who'd had a health scare. And the family is building a resort, and that's kind of been the story of this series, is them, the kids coming back home and being together and everything. And he owns a business also in California. That's a surf shop and stuff. And so he's traveling between the two every couple of weeks. But eventually he's planning to move to Minnesota once things are stable and he has good people running his shop and everything. However, after a few days home, and she lives in Minneapolis and works there, she gets a call from her daughter, and she is like, "Mommy, please come and get me. I hate it here." And the dad is like, "Do not come to get her. She's fine." And Dahlia is like, "No, I've always said if my daughter wants me, I'm coming." So she's like, "I'll be back tomorrow." And he's like, "No, don't come and get her." And she's like, "No, I'm coming back. I promised my daughter I would. I can stay in, a hotel nearby or whatever. But if my daughter needs me, I'm going to be there." And Dylan is like, "How about I travel back with you and you can actually stay at my place?" And he's like, "I will just get more work done at my California place." So literally it's an insta-love situation. I'm just telling you that, okay? This is Willow Astor does this lots of times in her books, and I don't care. The way she writes it, I love it. Okay, I love it. I can't help it. It won't be for everyone, and I totally understand, and I get it when it's not for everyone. But the way she wrote this was so sweet. I loved how they had this instant connection and they just didn't want to be apart from each other. And then there's the tiny twist to this. I mean, it's a big twist, but it's a tiny twist. They haven't said each other's last name to each other yet. That's the most unbelievable part to me. And she sees, I think, a picture in his house. I can't remember what it is, but she finally is like, what's your last name? And they say their last names, and she says her name is Dahlia Granger, and he says, again, I think it's Winthrop or Whitaker. I can't remember what his last name is supposed to be. But she realizes, oh my God, you're my family's nemesis. Because if you've read the other two books, you'll know that there's a guy named Bruce Granger who is like, you know, if you could say mortal enemies in a contemporary, he is like mortal enemies with Dylan's dad. And we've been having problems with him this whole series so far. And she's like, oh my God, we're doomed. And I think what makes it work, though, is because of their instant connection and how well they were getting along. Once he finds out who she is, Dylan is just like, well, whatever, we'll figure it out. Like, our connection is so insane. It's so good. We're meant to be together. And whatever it is that was keeping us apart, or I mean, whatever it is that's keeping our families at each other's throats, like, it can't be that important because we're meant to be, is kind of the thing you're supposed to get from it. So they agree that because the connection is so strong, they're going to keep seeing each other. And if, you know, things go well, because again, they've only spent a weekend together. So what's the point in telling their families, causing all this drama, which, okay, mostly from her dad, because Dylan's family will accept her. Like, he just knows it. He knows they will. And we know that they will, because we've already had dealings with people related to Bruce in previous books, and it worked out. What's funny is that Dahlia's cousin is Milo, who's the hero from the first book. And so, like, Dylan already knows that his family will accept someone who's related to Bruce Granger. But it's Bruce who will not be okay with it, right? He is a total loser. But he's also a very powerful total loser. But anyway, it's beautiful. I love how Dylan is with her little girl. I love how his family is with Dahlia and the little girl. They're just so welcoming and accepting. And this was just a sweet treat, okay? It was narrated in duet by Austin Stone and Isabel Ruther. So another audiobook that I just loved. And I just adore this series. I think it's so nostalgic to me for it being in Minnesota and the family being so just wonderful and cozy. It reminds me of my own. So yeah, I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's like a 3 on the spice scale. They're, yes, very sexy together. We love it. And I highly recommend it. So there you go. That is my stats for April and my top 5 reads. I will have links to all of those down below, including the fanfic if you'd like to give it a try. And yeah, I'm so excited for what May is going to hold. There will be finishing up the last 2 episodes of Outlander. We will have the off-campus series starting. I'm planning to review both of those things. Though I did hear that off-campus is going to drop everything at once. And I mean, I guess that makes sense. That's what we were used to and stuff. But I kind of am nostalgic for the weekly wrap-ups of stuff. So I don't know how I'm going to do off-campus yet, if I'm going to review the whole thing in one. I guess it will depend on how much there is to talk about, right? Like, I don't think this is going to be as revolutionary as Heated Rivalry was at all. But also to remember, Off Campus was filmed, I believe, before Heated Rivalry was, or at least a good amount of it. And so, or written and stuff too. So any changes that Heated Rivalry will lead to in adaptations will probably be a few years out yet, because it's going to take a while to see the effects of what Heated Rivalry brings to adaptations. So, very interesting. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I will see you very soon for a new video. Bye.